I have worked at home by myself for years. I've always enjoyed working alone, but there is no doubt I miss the community and accountability that comes from working in person with others. Now, my guest today is the founder of Caveday, an online community designed to connect remote workers and provide a focused environment to get more done. This is the 5 a.m. Miracle, episode number 356. Hyper-focused social remote work with Jeremy Redleaf. Good morning, I am Jeff Sanders, and this is the podcast dedicated to dominating your day before breakfast. My guest today is a daytime Emmy Award-winning artist, filmmaker, and entrepreneur. He is the head honcho at Brackets Creative, a co-founder of Caveday, and the founder of Odd Job Nation. He also created the role of Gonigan on Sesame Street, which my daughter loves. Now, here's my conversation with Jeremy Redleaf. So let's just jump right in with how you got into the world of focus and productivity. I know I've got quite a story myself of things that I love in that arena, but for you as a filmmaker or business founder, what led you to realize just the importance of focus overall?
Sure. So about 4 years ago, I'm a filmmaker, and that means writing and directing. And 4 years ago, I realized I had no time to write. I had little pockets of 30 minutes here, 40 minutes here, and I couldn't figure out how to protect my time. And then when I had the time, I didn't know how to make the most of it. So I was in crisis. I was in my shrink's office. This sounds like such a New York story, but I was in my shrink's office, and I said, what do I have to do? I have to change something. And he said, what do you have to do? And I said, I think I need to take a cave day. And he's like, great, what is a cave day? And so I said, it's day off the grid where you have to focus and you can't do this, or that. And he goes, great, when are you going to do it? So I did a cave day by myself, made up all these rules, and it was transformative. I got so much done in that one day, but it was really draining. It was really de-energizing to be off the grid, to have no connection, and to just be grinding through this thing for a whole day. So I approached two collaborators and I said, what if this was a group event? Could it be energizing if it was a group event? We threw one off in New York City as a one-off, and it sold out within minutes, and people said, when are you doing it again? And we said, oh, I guess we're going to do it again. And so it really kind of just spread by wildfire in New York City, and so we started doing it once a month, and then eventually we started to do it every week, and then every day. And now today we run group focus sessions from 7:30 in the morning to 8 p.m. at night for a global community that comes together to do group focus together, to actually try to do deep work, but do it with some accountability.
Yeah, so describe for us exactly how that works, because I know that I've seen the website. I'm very intrigued by what this is, because when I think about focus, I definitely envision myself, like you said, in a cave, but by myself. And so how does this work in terms of being a group event?
Yeah, it's sort of that feeling of being alone together. So we do group, we work together, and then we break together. So we're gonna hop in for a 45-minute sprint, and then we're gonna do a little break together. We're gonna stretch. We're gonna do some jumping jacks. We're gonna do a pole. We're gonna break into a breakout room. So the idea is that all these things, all these distractions that we love to do when we're trying to work are really just ways to get oxytocin and dopamine hits, right? So if we're gonna cut all that stuff out, and we're gonna go into the cave, we still need that oxytocin and that dopamine. So we try to use the breaks and the taking the break together to really feed us again, right? So and it's a way to get most people only get seen for the results of their work every once in a while, right? So like you launch a new podcast and then people know about that, or you finish the book and then people know about that. But every day you're doing hard work, in little micro ways, and no one sees that. So when you come to a cave, you're in a group of people that are all trying to do the same thing, which is to work with full focus, and you get to hear how people are doing it and how hard it is for, we have Oscar winners, Emmy winners in our community. You get to hear that everyone struggles with doing focused work. So it can really kind of transform your relationship to work.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, the process is where everything happens. So that's a very good point that we don't get recognized often for those hours. I'm curious in terms of the way this works. Are you on camera while you're working, or you just kind of have that session together after the work session?
Yeah, so we use Zoom, and we encourage everyone to keep their camera on because, when I start to get stuck, realizing that there's a whole grid of people that are looking focused really is powerful for me. So we encourage people to keep the video on, but, you hide it behind your whatever window you're working in. So you're not like staring at somebody while you're trying to work. And then the facilitator lets you know when the sprint is over. So we don't tell you how long the sprints are. And that's one of the things that really sets us apart. It's not about knowing. It's in fact, the research around flow points to the idea that letting go of time is really the way to create the conditions for flow. So you know roughly how long they are, but you don't know exactly how long they are. So instead of working, starting to slow down a few minutes before it's over, you got to work to the end.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I love the concept because I know I spent quite a few hours by myself in libraries and at home in my home office trying to figure out how to get work done. I know one aspect is like I'll take breaks on my own, but I don't tend to have the social aspect. So like when you mentioned this earlier, there's like these break times. So what's actually happening to kind of get people fired up to continue working?
Yeah, so we think about it as managing energy. So we're managing your brain, your body, and your spirit. So and depending on the break, we'll speak to two of those at any given time. So it might be about stretching, just remembering that you have a body, and then we might be checking in about every cave has a theme. So we might be checking in about the theme. We might be asking you to share a progress report with a small group of people, or we'll just do something fun and silly or stupid to cleanse the palate. So we'll draw something together. We just kind of keep it. It's really about, resetting and re-energizing. And sometimes that just means thinking about something else for 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's very true. Would you say the people that are in this group are mostly like remote workers, people that tend to be alone when they work, or are these people that are in corporate offices but just want the chance to like reconnect with someone else?
Sure. So before the pandemic, we mostly catered to remote workers, artists, small business owners, solopreneurs. Of course, when the pandemic hit, we started to see all sorts of new kinds of people, CEOs and people that have worked at their desk for their whole lives, and now we're stuck at home and we're like, well, how do I do this? So it's kind of changed over time, and so now now that we're all working from home, we have just this insane assortment of people doing all sorts of different work in all in over 20 countries.
So are people also like connecting in this group to work on similar projects together, or is it mostly solo work?
No, you're bringing your own work. Some teams come together and they'll chat privately, inside the cave. But this is it's hard to do deep work or deep focus in a group in any sort of format, right?
Right.
If you've ever been on a conference call. Even when I'm collaborating with somebody else, I find that at some point you always have to go, all right, I'm going to go off and do this thing, and then I'll come back and I'll give it to you. It's really hard to create together in that way. This is for those solo pursuits.
I mean, would you say that people are mostly being more productive because of this time in terms of, like, I know you just mentioned the idea, like, group work is not necessarily that productive. Would you say that people that are here are getting a lot of great results because they're spending this time just with being that intentional?
I think so, yeah. One of the things, we're not productivity bros. We didn't create this so you can maximize every second of your life and never have a regular life. We have this sort of cave philosophy that if you did a 3-hour deep work sprint, you could probably finish all the work you needed to do in the day if you really, really focus in that time. So what can you make more time for? So we're really about working smarter and creating that free time more than saying that you should maximize every moment. To be honest, this is a crazy time. So people are, in 1 week, they'll be getting a lot done, and the next week they're struggling because something comes up for them. So we try to create an inclusive environment. So whether to say that your focus right now is 2 out of 10 or 10 out of 10, you still feel welcome.
So how many hours a day would you say is best for this kind of deep work? I mean, we've read Cal Newport has a book called Deep Work, and I know that he has a lot of intention around, you put in, maybe 4, maybe 5 hours at a day, and then at that point, your brain kind of shuts down. I know that's been my experience. I have probably 4 hours in me, and then I'm done. Like, how many hours a day are people spending in these groups?
Yeah, we do have some cave rats who stay all day long, but yeah, I think 3 or 4 hours is probably a nice average cap. But it really just depends on what kind of work you need to do. The thing is, in this new world, there's this idea of makers and managers from Y Combinator, this famous startup incubator. So some people are makers and some people are managers. And sometimes people are both makers and managers. Some part of the day I need to write the next chapter of the book, and then I do my podcast interviews. And so that's a manager hourly thing. And then I need to go back and then think deeply about this other thing. So most people are makers and managers in this new economy. So the manager work you don't really need to do in a deep work environment, but it's that maker work that really needs your full capacity. And so Cal Newport says that your value as a knowledge worker is the amount of time you have for deep work and your ability to do it.
That's very true. Yeah, he's a brilliant mind when it comes to this kind of topic. I'm curious in terms of the idea of achieving deep focus as well. Like, are there strategies in terms of like listening to the right kind of music or ensuring that you have a distraction-free environment? Or how do you ensure that the people who are in this are maintaining focus at the time period?
Yeah, so this is something that you got to attack on a couple of different fronts. So we start with the workplace. We talk about work mise en place. So the idea in a restaurant, in the kitchen, there's mise en place. So you only have the tools out that you need to make the meal. And so make sure that, when we start with that. So make sure that your desk is set up for success. You've got water nearby. You've closed the tabs and apps you don't need. You've turned off in-screen notifications, right? Most things can wait to the break. If there's something that can't wait, you've figured out a way to make sure that it doesn't get in the way of your life. So an example of that is there's one really important email that could come in during this time that would really I would have to deal with immediately. Well, maybe I can reach out to them and say, call me if there's something today, or I could put up an autoresponder. So just making sure that you've tied up all loose ends so you can really feel okay going off the grid. It's about ritual, I think, to get into that flow state. We do a lot of physical rituals at Caveday to help people, just like an athlete would cue themselves physically to get ready to get into the zone. There's a lot of new research about how the power of ritual can really help us in that regard. Music is actually not great for productivity. The studies about binaural beats have really been debunked a little bit. We do recommend one service called Brain.fm, which is scientifically designed for neural phase locking, and I think that's great. Some people still want to listen to music, and if you're going to do that, I think it's fine. You just don't want to listen to anything with lyrics. You want things that are kind of repetitive and mellow, right? You don't want to be jarred by the music in any way. White noise is another great thing. And then it's about creating rules for yourself. I think there's a lot of power in doing that. So what I do is, all right, I'm gonna work on this new chapter, and it's, every time I do it, I feel like panic and I feel horrible. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a buffer. So if I get stuck, I have to wait 20 minutes before I can move on to something else. So I'm gonna create this buffer, and then when the buffer happens, I'm gonna journal for 5 minutes, see what happens. I'm gonna draw. I'm gonna just sit with it before moving on. You can kind of sort of create rules that you can follow when you inevitably hit snags, because our lizard brains are challenging and have to be overcome. And if those things don't work, I recommend technology blockers. So use a tool like Freedom or Self-Control. Take the decision off the table. Make it so you can't even go to another site if you wanted to.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I think the rules and the boundaries there are just essential when it comes to this kind of focus. And you mentioned a couple of times this idea of drawing or journaling, or this kind of what I would consider as like creative work that's kind of mixed in here. Like, how do you think that creativity kind of fits into the idea of like optimizing a focus session?
When creativity is flowing for me, I'm not judging myself. And I think that for a lot of people, when they're struggling to work, it's because something about it is existentially challenging. I'm afraid of some sort of outcome that I don't want. If I do this and it's not good, I might have to reckon with the fact that I feel like I suck. So to me, creativity is a way about empowering myself to feel great and to remember that I'm talented and I have something to offer. And so just a way to kind of let things flow a little more, because sometimes great ideas seem bad at first, right? And if we're judging them and editing ourselves because we're feeling critical, you're never going to get to the good idea. So I think it's just a technique for sort of opening the channel.
Yeah, that's a great point. I love the idea of just not judging yourself. I think that's really powerful. There's one thing you mentioned earlier, this idea of managing energy. And I know that when I think about productivity in the course of a whole day and wanting to maintain focus, I tend to schedule my focus blocks of time, like usually during the morning hours, like when I would consider myself to be like most alert, most awake at those hours. And that's when I feel like I have the most to give. Like, are you like encouraging people to schedule their time around those kinds of like energy cycles? Or when is the best time, I guess, for you to make sure that you're going to get the most value of the time when you're working?
I feel like this is the question of the 5 a.m. morning podcast, right?
It is, yeah.
This is the signature question. So, we love that book by Daniel Pink called When, which talks about chronotypes. And so, without butchering his research, basically there are three main kinds of cycles that we all have, right? There's the early risers, there's the third birds, and the larks. Basically, it's, we all have a peak recovery and a trough. So most people get them in that order: peak, recovery, trough, right? I start strong in the morning. I feel after I eat, an hour after I eat, I start to lose energy, and then I recover towards the end of the day. That's 2/3 of people experience it that way. But there's also other variations, right? There's recovery, peak, trough, and then there's peak last. You peak, you're a night owl. I think the first thing is just to figure out when you're the most awake. Priceonomics did a study of about 1 million workers, and they found the average was about 11 a.m. when the most work got done. So that could be a place to start. But for you, if it's 8 p.m., don't fight it. I would try to lean into it and see if you can create your schedule around those times when you're the most awake. We should do the hardest work when we're the most awake.
Yeah, that's true. I definitely have some kind of a second peak late in the day, but I usually get distracted more easily, even though I'm more alert then too. So I think it's that balance of distraction with focus.
Yeah, but that's one more thing about this which I think is really helpful, is that it gives people permission to do lower cognitive tasks at different parts of the day, right?
Yeah.
Like, we all have a trough. This is part of our biology. So I don't have to feel bad about the fact that after lunch I feel less smart, and so I'm just going to switch to admin tasks then, or that's what I'm going to do my email, And so it kind of gives people permission to let themselves off the hook for not having 100% capacity all day long.
Yeah, that's true. It definitely kind of ebbs and flows there. In terms of procrastination, I know that one thing that I've toyed with over the years is intentionally putting some things off to the last minute just to force myself to do it when I have to. But generally speaking, like, I like to be proactive. I like to get things done early. Like, how do you manage like an overall task load in terms of like prioritization to make sure that you're not going to find yourself stressed out unless you're doing that on purpose?
Sure. Yeah. Well, we have like a little accountability competition that we run every month, and we have people break out their tasks between urgent and important. Obviously, I think this goes back to Roosevelt's, right? This idea that we have urgent tasks. These are tasks that need to get done. They probably already have a deadline. And then there's the important stuff, the stuff we either want to do or will really push the needle forward and don't have that clear deadline. Most people get their urgent tasks done if they're afraid of the consequences, right? I promised somebody this doc by Tuesday, so I'm going to get that in. But launching something new or doing deep work that doesn't have an immediate payoff, that's the stuff that we really have to figure out a way to trick ourselves really to do, right? If we have resistance to it or procrastination comes up when we think about it. The question for you is, how can you trick yourself into creating deadlines for important work, or learning about what motivates you, right? There's that Gretchen Rubin has that great test around what motivates you. And I'm an obliger. So if I tell someone I'm going to do something, I do it. A lot of the people that come to Caveday are people that are socially motivated. So if you come to a Caveday and you say, I'm going to write a really hard email, we're going to ask you about that, and so now you've tricked yourself into committing to doing this thing. So yeah, I don't know, how do you trick yourself?
That's a great question. I think usually I went back and forth between the idea of procrastinating to the last minute. I mean, one of the examples is like preparing for a meeting or a podcast interview for that matter, where I will sometimes say like I'd prefer just to kind of have all of the thoughts about that event happening at the same time. So if I prepare for the meeting and then have the meeting, it all happen in one block of time, which in part seems more efficient, but then it means that if anything popped up at the last second and I need more time, I don't have it. And so there's a danger to postponing that. And so I think over the years, what I've tried to do is do as much as I possibly can way before it's due, just to take the pressure off, because I don't like that. But when it suits me, I can do it. So I think for me, it's really dependent on the task, but I really try to make sure that for me, I get the important stuff done early as I can.
Sure. Well, so what I think you're talking about is identity. And so about 2 years ago, I used to be a traveler who was always sprinting to get to the gate. And I just decided that for 2019, I'm never going to run in an airport. I can do it. I've got TSA pre-check. I've gotten on every time, but it just doesn't feel good. And so I'm going to now identify around being a person who doesn't run in the airport. And so that's kind of what I think what we're talking about here. Like, I want to be a person, I know I feel better when I do it this way, and I want to be the kind of person who doesn't stress themselves out.
Well, I think in part that's also kind of the origin story of the 5 a.m. miracle itself, because the story I've told in this podcast for years was that I started waking up early because I was getting to work late and stressed out. I didn't like the idea of waking up, already behind schedule. And so I'd rather be a person who just has a little more flexibility in my time, a little bit more of that proactive nature to my life. Now, I've taken that to the extreme in a lot of cases, and I'm way too proactive. But I think, yeah, you're right with the idea of identity in the sense of figuring out like kind of lifestyle you want to live that produces the results you want. But also, I think back to your point about process, allows you to kind of get the work done the way you want to get it done, which I think really speaks to kind of how you want to be productive.
Yeah, I think especially right now, any little things you can do that make you feel more in control of your time or the way you're spending your time have compounding impact. It might seem small, right? Just deciding to do work a little earlier might not seem like there's a win there. But if you feel more in control and more like you're playing offense, I think that can be really powerful.
So how does accountability actually work in terms of the Caveday structure? Because I know that when I've had accountability for tasks, most of the time I feel like I don't need it, except for those few things in my life that I just never tend to do. And so if I had accountability, it'd be helpful. So how does it work to keep people, I guess, doing the things that they committed to doing?
It's whatever you want it to be, right? So when you sign on, you put your work in your name so everyone can see what you're working on. And then we ask you about it a couple times. We do polls. We have you check in small groups. And so the accountability is really just around being seen in a social environment, having to talk about what you're doing. So for people that are socially motivated, that's powerful enough. But you can come and of course not focus or not do what you said you're going to do, but you're going to have to tell it to somebody. So I think most of us are social beings, the ones of us that are not sociopaths, and so it's a motivator. The thing about accountability is it's the knowledge that somebody's watching or that somebody knows. What am I gonna feel like, or what is it gonna be like if I let them down? And everyone has a different relationship to that. In times of my life, I've hired coaches, and I've always decided that even an okay coach is probably worth 75 cents an hour because I respond so well to attention and accountability. Even if they add nothing, just the fact that they're there, and they're asking me questions and I'm devoting time to this will be valuable.
Yeah, this I think this sounds similar to, like, I just recently bought a video program for stretching to do the splits, because one of my kind of goals by the end of the year. And I only bought this course because I wanted somebody else to kind of walk me through the process, not because I don't know how to do it, because I do, but it's because I'd rather have somebody else kind of just saying, okay, next step, now go. And like having someone else even just saying that, even on a recorded video, is enough for me to then say, okay, I'm actually going to do it now, as opposed to postponing it.
Right, and you probably don't want to feel like you've wasted money, and so putting some money down putting some skin in the game is actually really valuable.
Yeah, that's true. I think investment into the outcome in that sense is definitely a powerful factor.
So I think small investments are a great way to trick yourself if that's a motivator for you.
Right, that's very true. In terms of habits, this is one thing I love to ask my guests about. I mean, you can discuss it more in your team if you want to, but I'm curious in terms of just like, are there other habits in your day that you're ensuring that will kind of allow your whole day to be productive? Because obviously focus blocks of time can be a really important one, but do you have other habits, whether it's fitness or meditation or anything else that you're doing to keep you kind of, I guess, being your best self every day?
Habits are where I need a lot of help. So I created Caveday because I needed that environment for focus and accountability and connection. And the same thing for accountability for me reigns true. So I do our accountability program, and so I have to pay $1 for every habit I don't do in a week. So It's the only way I've been able to trick myself into creating habits that work. I have a meditation habit and I have a exercise habit, and those are all great. And week after week, I just try to raise them a little bit. The habit that comes to mind that maybe is a little strange, but maybe is useful, is that I've been working with a somatic coach and just sort of learning about body intelligence. And she made me buy, her name is Jane Clapp. She made me buy a little mini rebounding trampoline, which is weird. And okay, cool, great. So I have this little mini rebounding trampoline, and she's like, don't use it it's not about working out. You could do a rebounding class if you wanted to, but anytime you feel just gunked up by something emotional, or you're just like feeling off in your body while you're trying to do work, just like jump on this thing and just sort of like, make noise and just try to like move it through your body quickly. And it's been incredible. What I do is if I feel that coming on, I just take care of it in a really pronounced way really quickly so I can get back to my work quicker.
So are you using this as kind of like an emotional tool to kind of get past something you're working through, or explain that a little more, because I'm curious about this.
Sure, right. So there's expanding research about how we sort of, the body, there's that famous book, The Body Keeps Score. There's a lot of, research around how we hold things in our body. And so, if we're trying to do deep work that's challenging and it's coming up in my body and I just feel like something in the pit of my stomach or my jaw feels tight, I can sort of start to become aware and notice these things through mindfulness. And then I can do something physical to get rid of them. And so for a lot of people, that is going for a run, going for a walk, doing push-ups, whatever. These are ways to move through that body sensation. This is just a new one that I'm trying out, which is to just jump on this trampoline and just sort of move the energy through my body.
It's very interesting. Yes, I've heard of rebounding used before for all kinds of, detoxing or exercise methodology. I've never heard it used for working through something. I know personally I do similar to the idea of I'll do push-ups, I'll go for a walk, that kind of thing. But I'm curious about this whole trampoline thing. I think it sounds interesting.
Yeah, well, when we're trying to hit flow, we're trying to have a relaxed nervous system. If we're hyper aroused, it's not great for our work and hitting flow. So, sometimes we'll encourage people, if they're really struggling during a cave, to go take a walk, to do something.
So I didn't ask you about caffeine earlier. This is one thing I'm always curious about too, because I have definitely used caffeine and drink coffee while I'm doing my focus blocks of time. Have you found that that's something that you have leaned on as well, or what do you tend to do in terms of, I guess, stimulants or nutrition when you're trying to be focused?
I mean, yeah, caffeine is my one vice, and because I have so few, I've allowed myself to have it, and it doesn't seem to if I stop drinking it before noon, it doesn't seem to have a crazy crash for me. And if it did, I would probably wean back. We do talk about what kinds of snacks to have during the day in terms of to maintain full focus. We do recommend snacks from 100 to 150 calories with a low glycemic index. That's what research has shown is the best for maintaining energy for focus. So it's more eating in small little bites, fruits, nuts, things that have low glycemic indexes. The age-old question about caffeine is just what are the costs for you? Are the costs greater than the reward?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've gone back and forth with that. I tend to be a caffeine addict most of my life, so that's always a vice for me as well. I definitely know what that feels like.
And it's also the ritual, right? Again, we're talking about ritual.
Right.
Part of it is the feeling in my body. A part of it is all the feelings associated with the flavor of coffee. And so how can you create that with something else? Can you create that with tea? Can you create that with lighting a candle and drinking a little shot of grapefruit juice? How can you, if caffeine is not working out for you, can you create ritual and positive feelings around something else?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love the idea of changing habits around nutrition, mostly because I've definitely noticed that when I do things like let's have a morning smoothie, for example, as opposed to days when I don't, I feel myself either maintaining focus better or worse based upon my diet. There's a clear connection for me. I know that when I am more intentional with my fitness, my sleep, my food, that I do tend to get more done if I'm more intentional in those areas. And I definitely find that being a healthier person is great for lots of reasons, but there's definitely a payoff there in terms of getting things done.
Yeah, that's awesome. You're my hero.
Well, I'm not great every day, but I like to try. So where can our listeners learn more about Caveday? Because obviously I want them to check it out and see if they can get some value from there. So where can they go?
Yeah, come to caveday.org. If you use the code 5am podcast, you can come for a free 3-hour cave, and we're Caveday on all the social networks as well, just like a cave day. And the idea of the cave goes back centuries, right? People have been going to caves forever to shut out the world and transform. And so the metaphor is especially in this chaotic world full of distractions, full of things vying for your time. We need to do this. We need to go into the cave, shut everything out, and allow ourselves the space to do our most important work.
That is very true. Yeah, I'll have links for Caveday on the show notes page this week. But Jeremy, this has been excellent. I really think it's an awesome thing you're doing. I'm really glad that you're kind of bringing people together to get more things done. Because one of my goals of this podcast is productivity, and obviously a podcast is one way to reach people. But actually connecting to get work done is obviously a lot better in a lot of ways. So yeah, thanks again for that.
Yeah, sure. And highly recommend just working with someone in work sprints and breaks and just seeing what that feels like. It can be a really valuable and enriching activity.
Now, for the action step this week, of course, try out Caveday. If you work from home or you think you would benefit from connecting with others in a virtual way that promotes community, accountability, and productivity, then this could be a great tool for you. Now, Jeremy was nice enough to provide a free gift for all the listeners this week. If you visit caveday.org and use code 5AMPodcast, you'll get 3 free hours, which should be plenty of time to get something important accomplished. Once again, that's caveday.org with code 5AMPodcast. And for the show notes page this week, go to jeffsanders.com/356. I'll be sure to have all the links discussed today right there, including caveday.org, as well as Jeremy's other websites. That's all I've got for you this week here on the show. Until next time, you have the power to change your life, and the fun begins bright and early.